Welcome to the Defiant Spirit podcast. If we haven't met yet, I'm Dr. Baruch Halevi. Everybody calls me B. Welcome. And a special welcome to a guest in my podcast. I was a guest on his podcast, and the studio might look familiar because now I'm operating out of his podcast studio. Let's do podcast. And that is my son. I had to think about that for a moment. My son and good friend, I guess I would say at this point in life, and a study partner in many areas, Yehuda. Welcome, Yehuda.
Thank you for having me. And the roles are kind of reversed here, where last time I was interviewing you, but I'm glad we get to come on and talk about more of what you're doing because I'm super interested in all things Enneagram, and we can kind of go in that direction this time around.
Awesome. Well, we're just going to go with the flow and see where it takes us. This is the first on my side of the Defiant Spirit, but not the last, because people are all the time reaching out to me wanting to know about the Enneagram. What is the Enneagram? Why are you so passionate about it? And I thought that would be a good place to jump off today. It's just a conversation between you and I, and especially you, since I have the opportunity to ask you some questions, interview you. Why? Why the Enneagram? So I'm going to tell my why first, and then I would love to hear what speaks to you when it comes to this topic. So, as much of my audience knows, certainly you know, for many years I was a rabbi, and it spoke to me for quite some time. Studied for 6 years, functioned as a rabbi for 15 years, so a good chunk of my adult life. And one of the things I loved during that time was I had a structure, right? It's called in Judaism, it's called halakha, and it literally means a path. And we all need a path to walk in this lifetime. And it worked for me for a while. And then it stopped being a path and it became something else. And it was during that time that I started looking for additional paths, other paths, additional paths, supplemental paths. One of them became yoga in Hinduism, which I'm a practitioner of. And for me, that's a body path. And then there's meditation. As you probably know, I sit in meditation every morning, and that's really a quieting sort of path and gives me a direction during my day of mindfulness and being more contemplative. But after I left being a rabbi, I really needed something to navigate the world, relationships, and that's when I returned to the Enneagram. I returned to it for many reasons, not the least of which is it's ancient. And a lot of people don't realize that. They think it's a personality typing system. And it is that, but it's so much more. And so I started diving into the Enneagram to become a path for me to figure out, who am I? Where am I going in life? How to navigate, how to be in relationship with others that aren't necessarily like me, and I don't have a roadmap for that. And I guess the last point that really spoke to me and still speaks to me, and this comes back to you, is our podcast together. Because for those who haven't watched it, it was a great podcast, I'd like to think. And it was all about why. Knowing your why. What's your why? I coach people, I counsel people now. That's my profession, and all day, every day. And I realize so few people know their why, have a why, even know what, we're talking about when we talk about having a why. And that's why I turned to the Enneagram. The Enneagram for me is really, I think of it as 9 whys. Ennea means 9. So it's 9 pathways to why. And it's really, for me, become a coaching tool and a counseling process for helping people find their why. And then we also got to introduce this guy here pretty soon, or girl.
Momo.
If you can't see Momo might be the cutest dog I've ever seen. Although I'm not convinced Momo's not a cat. But Lap dog. So I turned to the Enneagram for those reasons, for roadmap. We're going to dive into it. But during that time, you got exposed to the Enneagram. I'm not sure at what point it stuck for you, but I would love to hear your journey to the Enneagram. A, because you're an interesting person. B, because you represent a different generation. And I see a lot of people in your generation interested in turning to the Enneagram.
So I was first introduced to the Enneagram by you when I was 19, freshman in college, and it caught on like wildfire in my friend group, where in our free time, it became a secret language, a secret code almost, where we all understood this language, this path of understanding the world and other people. And we would spend time, where most people would be having fun at parties or social events, trying to type people in public and saying, oh, definitely a 2 right there, definitely a 4. And so that's how I kind of got started and familiarized with the Enneagram. It wasn't until fairly recently that I started applying it into other areas in my life. This all started when I took on the role of president of my student organization. And aside from all of the involvement I had had with this group beforehand, now I was asked to become a leader. And in doing so, I wanted to better understand how I can inspire specific people in my organizations based on their skill set and their strengths. And in doing so, I turned to the Enneagram and I said, okay, I know that some people have this fiery approach to creating change. Maybe that looks like an 8. Or some people are super helpful at assisting, but sometimes they can get walked on. Sometimes they can take on more than they can handle. Maybe that looks like a 2. And I started working with you to piece this together. I had everyone on my board take exams. And well, it helped them understand through different results that we looked at. It also helped me understand how to approach these people in different scenarios and how to draw upon their unique strengths. That was a critical change in my mindset as a leader, because I think we assume that everyone operates like we operate and they're just like a copy of us almost. And so if I deal with things confrontationally, other people do best in that way, when in fact, that's not necessarily the case. So it changed my perspective kind of on that whole approach to leadership.
Have you ever heard of Brene Brown's definition of sympathy versus empathy?
Yeah, about like climbing down into the pit.
Yeah, so sympathy is walking down the path, coming to a hole, seeing somebody down there and saying, can I help you? Empathy is coming to that same hole, looking down there, jumping in and say, let's find our way out together. I'd have to argue like you should have a rope or something, like otherwise it's stupidity. Now you're 2 trapped people in the hole. But it's putting yourself into as opposed to looking at or talking at. And that's what I hear you just sort of delineating, right? Seeing the people as an extension of you or seeing them from the inside out.
Yes. And that's just talking about purely my relationship with others. Enneagram understanding of self is a whole nother topic to discuss. But I'd say understanding others, the solution to the disconnect between people can be understanding why they react in certain ways, what they need in any given situation to feel belonging, to feel needed, etc., and what you can call upon them for, what they're willing and what they love to give and bring to the table. So the solution there is climbing down, hopefully with a rope, into that pit.
Right. And to me, going into that hole is knowing somebody's why. A lot of people don't realize this, but Myers-Briggs, Strength Finders, DISCs, Big Five, lots of personality typing systems, they all have their place. Only the Enneagram deals with why we do what we do. The other ones deal in almost like a surface level of what it looks like, who I am in this situation, my extroverted, introverted. And I've talked to a good friend of mine, Dr. Dan, is an MBTI specialist, that's Myers-Briggs, and he says clearly that is not the purpose of at least MBTI. Enneagram is why. And so, those who haven't seen it, we'll give you a nice picture of it, but it's a very powerful image, right? This image of the Enneagram, and there it is. And so you'll look at it and you'll see there are 9 numbers around the circle, and each one of these, there's a reason why there's 9. We'll do another podcast on why 9, but each one of these is a different, I think of them not as personality, but as energy, right? A different energy. And people show up in this life with different energies and they move through it. And I see this too. I've seen it with you as an example. I think back on you being a baby and there was a lot of 1 qualities. I don't know at what point it gels and this is really your defining energy, but at some point it's true. It sort of becomes our dominant operating system. And if I know somebody's Enneagram type, I can know what motivates them, right? I can know their why. And I hear that's sort of what you're seeing around the board, right? I want to know what drives somebody, not just what they look like on the surface, not just how they're presenting, but why they do what they do. Was that your part of your experience?
Yeah, definitely. Well, yes, I wanted to know why they do what they do. But my original intention, I would say, wasn't coming from a place of trying to understand, which I then realized that that's crucial. I think I wanted to help them understand, and I wanted to help other people understand one another. But it was definitely a journey because people don't like being put in a box. And I've had to explain, and you've done a very good job at explaining this to me, that because each of these types are energies, we carry each type inside of us. And the goal is to be able to express all 9 types. And in that expression of every type, that's the 10th type. That's the whole circle. And that's a very big difference, in my opinion, between Enneagram and Myers-Briggs or another typing system. Because the why of the Enneagram, why is this important, is because when we transcend singular digit numbers and we get to that 10, that full circle, that is where transcendence of our reactionary tendencies comes in. And so, yeah, on a simple level, bringing this to the board, like I wanted to know people's strengths and weaknesses so I can better understand. But I think it turned into something bigger when I began to dive deeper into these concepts.
Well, that's certainly evolved from freshman year to senior year, because that was not the conversation I had with your buddies freshman year. I'm just going to put it out there. It was amazing to me, by the way. This is a trivial example, but it's also very profound. So maybe it was a Passover Seder or Thanksgiving. I don't know what it was.
I
But
think it was Passover.
We had a bunch of your buddies over. I think Safta, your grandmother, was there too. If not, then it was the same weekend. And I had a conversation with your buddies about, let's just be frank, how to get laid using the Enneagram. All right, that's what it was about. And I don't know if it worked. Probably did, because the Enneagram's pretty profound. So it can be something as trivial as a sort of a pickup tool in a bar. That same night, or certainly that same weekend, I talked to your grandmother about how to help your step-grandfather die. Not assisted suicide, but he's dying slowly, and she's an Enneagram 2, the helper. He's an Enneagram 9, the peacemaker. She's trying to help him in a way that was speaking to her, not to him. So we went through this exercise where she put herself into the 9, the peacemaker's role, and we started to explore, what do you imagine Howard wants from the dying process that would feel like you're helping him? And now she's on that inside the hole, like you're talking about before, of empathy, right? What motivates him? What does he really want? He wants autonomy. That's one of the things a 9 wants. So we started to address his why, and it changed the dynamics. But it was a good example of, it can go from the most trivial to the most profound of conversations.
Yeah, and I've definitely been on both sides of those.
You're welcome.
Freshman year, this was a golden ticket to going to any party in my friend group. But we also, we analyzed it, and what happened as a friend group that adopted the Enneagram, you have a board like of an organization, that's one thing. When a friend group adopts the Enneagram, we begin to see one another as like different crucial pieces of our group as a whole. And we all make up a different necessary piece of that. And that's why we worked as a friend group. We ended up going on a road trip, spring break, and we spent the whole time talking about the Enneagram. This person brings this thing to the table. I bring this quality. He brings this quality. And it really, it created very much a collective understanding of one another as well. I think families who adopt the Enneagram understand each other better for that reason.
That's so good. That's part of the magic of it is, first of all, the Hebrew word igul, right, means
Circle.
And the word egalitarian comes from igul. So it's egalitarian, right? It's equal power dispersed amongst the circle. And that's why it's a circle. It's not a line. There's not one that's better than the other, right? One is more powerful than the other. They're each both superpowers and kryptonites, light and dark. Your Yudah's podcast is Shells and Shadows. So shadows and light. And so if we think about that, then one isn't better than the other. Is Momo still alive?
Yeah. I think so.
That is a cute little puppy. And so if you go on a road trip, right? If they're all sevens in that car, you're screwed. You're going to have a good time and you're going to run out of gas.
Yeah.
Right? If they're all ones, you're screwed because you're going to have plenty of gas, but you may not have the good time. And so we need all of these. But the challenge is, and you know this, having just been typed right now, to get stuck in that box, to get stuck in that number, and that's who Yudah is. He's a one. As opposed to when you show up, that's your default. But that doesn't mean that's the end of who you are. It's a means to who you are, right?
Yeah, and I like what you said about having a 1 in the car versus a 7 in the car. We did have a 1, me, and a 7, and a 5, and a 9. And what we began to understand is that having certain people around us that take on different energies of the Enneagram can serve as like an antidote to our own reactionary tendencies. So I tried not to get too technical with this off the bat, but for example, the 1 has a line to 7.
So the 1 is the reformer, the 7 is the enthusiast.
Right. And without getting too deep, a 1 can break out of their perfectionist tendencies by taking on more of a spontaneity, an explorative, adventurous energy. And that's pretty self-explanatory. I found that being around my friend Eric, who is a 7, just being around him brought out that 7 quality into me because he is a 7. Mm-hmm. So not only can we use this to understand ourselves, but it helps us understand what different people around us bring to our lives, and then what we can in turn offer to others. If a 7 kind of needs to be drawn back down into that constructive, practical energy of a 1,
fill up the gas tank.
Yeah, they can offer that in return. So it's very dynamic. It's a partnership, and that changes the whole idea of relationships. It's not just me and you. It's what can I give you, what can you give me, etc.
We'll take it a step further. It's really, that's why I call it defy your number. That's my Enneagram system. And so defy your numbers, you're not a number. It's where you go when you're unconscious, when you're on default, when you're in fear. We end up surviving as a number. But we're not here to be a number. We're here to be, as Viktor Frankl, my teacher and mentor, calls the defiant power of the human spirit. And that is beyond number. So we help each other get out of the number, right? And that's what you're describing, is Eric is pulling you out of your number. Frankl called it he didn't talk about the Enneagram, but he talked about this quality of fear, the inner concentration camp. And we get stuck in it. If you get stuck in that place for long enough, you become the number and it becomes a prison. I think it was Dan Millman, what's his book? Peaceful Warrior, who said, most of us live behind invisible bars of our own creation or something like that. And that's what the 1 can become. And so our job is to help draw people out of their number, defy their number. And when I know somebody's number, we can joke about like sort of weaponizing the Enneagram and typing people to get laid in a bar, but you can also use it as a way to help people feel seen. Here's a little example. She doesn't listen to my podcast, so it's not outing her, but your sister, your youngest sister, she's a 9. That's a peacemaker. So peacemakers, you'll never tell them to turn it down. Right? Bring down the noise, bring down the energy, unlike your other sister. She is an 8. But the 9, it was her birthday party. Okay. I mean, this was last night, so it's very fresh for us. So if you notice, she started out on the end seat, sort of in the corner. There was like 11, 12 people on the table. But we eventually moved her to the middle seat. And that was conscious by design. because we knew she's a 9. And if we don't bring her to the center, she'll never insert herself in the center. And so we helped her. She didn't realize it, and it wasn't manipulation. Maybe it was. Helped her find the center so that on her birthday, she was at the center. Right? That's not something she would have done by herself. And if I didn't know she was a 9, maybe I'd intuit that. But I didn't have to intuit it because I had a roadmap right in front of me. Did you notice my magic last night?
I didn't pick up on that. Okay. It was very subtle.
It was very subtle. It's a wave of a hand.
Yeah. That makes sense why you did it, because if it was my other sister, who's a little bit more loud and outgoing,
we love you.
There wouldn't be a need to do that because she'd make her presence known anyway.
She finds the center.
She does.
Or she becomes the center wherever she is.
Yeah, true. So I want to shift gears a little bit because I have a question that people have asked me and this is a good time to ask it. Understanding other people through the Enneagram seems pretty straightforward. Mm-hmm. My relationship with someone else will improve if I can put myself into their shoes, understand their tendencies, their gifts, and maybe help them break out of that. Mm-hmm. That is something that immediately you'll see an improvement. If there's an argument and I understand where someone's coming from, I immediately step into their place, then problem solved. We're closer, we're connected. Mm-hmm. But in understanding the self through the Enneagram, it's not as straightforward, because the relationship between I and me, right? Mm-hmm. By understanding my own tendencies, my own gifts, my own strengths, I read it and I say, great, now what? Mm-hmm. What do I do? There's not an immediate click of connection necessarily. I may resonate with the description of my type. What do I then do to practically break out? Mm-hmm. Because this relationship that we have with ourselves is so different from others.
Yeah, it's an amazing tool. Like I said, for me, it's sort of become my halacha, my path of inner work, of self-development. It's just so practical. I use it all day, every day for my own personal growth. So it's a great question. How do you do that? I'll come back to the working title of this conversation, 9 whys. If I know somebody's why, or Viktor Frankl said, if you know your why, quoting Nietzsche, you can endure anyhow. And so if I know my why, I stop focusing on the surface. An iceberg is moving across the current against the wind. Up top, it's blowing this way, but the iceberg's going because 90% of the iceberg is under the water. 90% of who we are is under the water, even to ourselves. And so when I know I'm an 8, if I don't know anything about an 8, a challenger, and I'm a first timer, like a lot of people listening to this, and I know, okay, well, here's this sort of blueprint of an 8. 8s are angry, okay? Not kind of angry, not sort of angry. We're angry. Then when anger shows up, I can start to understand that's my currency. That's how I measure things. Bats are blind and they fly through the dark, their world is dark, by bouncing sound off of objects, sonar. And that's what I start doing with my anger. And now I realize I'm using anger to sort of feel my way through the world. And now I can recognize that, because I used to think it's who I am. But now I realize it's how I've learned how to survive and move through the world. Now I can recognize it. I can pay attention to it. I'm not real aware of my body sometimes when the anger takes over. It's sort of like watching the Incredible Hulk kind of a thing. Now I can watch it rise up as I'm turning into the Hulk. And I can say, you know what? This anger serves me at times, but not right now. And so I can start working with that. You're an Enneagram 1, right? That's usually, I say, that's how you react and you respond. You're the defiant power of the spirit. You're Yehuda Halevi. But when you're in reaction, you go into the 1. What's the 1's version of my Incredible Hulk anger? What's your version?
It's a different sort of anger.
Okay.
It's very much bodily, mm-hmm. physical, but it's often repressed and turned inward. Mm-hmm. It's often expressed almost through an acceptable form of anger, where if being outright explosive isn't acceptable, then criticism and judgment maybe a more outwardly acceptable form on a social level. So it may come out in that way. And it's in that way, almost like a 1 may wish that they could just spew fire like an 8, and that would cure everything. And sometimes we do, but immediately it returns, a 1 who then spews that fire immediately will feel guilty and turn it back on themselves, and it won't make them feel better.
Yeah, so that's super insightful. So now the question becomes, when that starts showing up, right? Everything is by design. Everything has a purpose, or else it wouldn't be here. That energy isn't bad or good. My anger is, we live in a society that sometimes reveres some of these energies, these whys, and not others. Like 2s are in a really tough spot, the helper. Because the world says they're just giving and giving and giving. Isn't that so beautiful and so wonderful? They're weaponizing giving. It's called manipulation, right? They're giving to get. And so that's a different type. But you and I are in the less socially acceptable spaces. I'm the least socially acceptable, the anger, the intensity. When it starts showing up for you, right, what is it offering you? That anger that's bubbling.
Well, before I see that it's offering something, usually I reject it.
Okay.
And I think that's the difference.
Why do you reject it?
Because it's terrifying, and you don't know what to do with it, and you don't know how to harness it and control it. But I think that what it is offering is, especially as a 1, mm-hmm. it's asking you to look beneath the structured surface that you've created and mm-hmm. try and live through. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that means drastically breaking away from the boxes that you've kind of put yourself in for the sake of success. And it seems scary to break away from what feels like control, mm-hmm. but in reality, it's very freeing. And sometimes the anger is take it to freedom. So
here's just a sort of brainstorm. What are the core whys? If you had to give a couple labels to the why of a 1, what's the why of a 1?
A 1 wants to be good.
Good. The good boy.
Wants to be right.
Right. Right and wrong. Binary. Justice. Order. You said that a few times. Structure.
Order, integrity.
So good. So now, all of a sudden, if you know your why, and then the anger starts percolating, you just described, it's none of those things, at least on the surface, right? You want to be good. It's starting to make you feel less than good.
Yeah.
And you have these hang-ups with anger, as opposed to, anger is not good or bad. It's amoral, right? Martin Luther King was one of the angriest people to walk the earth. He harnessed it. We revere him for harnessing it. So many of the change agents have harnessed. Gandhi, probably a 1. Mandela, probably a 1. They harness this thing. So now I come back to knowing your why, right? The anger's percolating. How can we reframe it, re-understand the anger?
Yeah, I think especially for people like 1s and other types as well who mm-hmm. see anger as something that is the enemy of good and just and moral, because there's this almost like desire to be saint-like. Mm-hmm. I think it's a good reminder of humanness.
So when it's percolating, though, let's just keep it practical, and it's coming up. And now you have this roadmap called the Enneagram, and now we've done a little bit of this coaching work. How's a new way we can listen to or relate to the anger?
I think it needs to be expressed and it needs to come out. And 9s don't let it come out. 1s have a difficult relationship with letting it come out, mm-hmm. how it comes out. I think something that's helped me is just being radically honest mm-hmm. with others and myself, but in a way that's rooted in kindness. So like there's this idea that I relate to a lot. It's related to the sefirot, the qualities that are put in this world in Kabbalah and Judaism. And so you have on the same level, you have chesed, which is kindness, and gevura, which is more of a a strength. But
8 and 2, by the way.
yeah,
Yeah.
but it can be, you can channel that strength, that fierceness rooted in kindness. And I think that's the solution to the one. It's being able to use that anger, but in a way that's kind towards yourself and others. And it's not always easy.
Yeah.
And that's another ideal you can get stuck in. But I think that's a practical way to.
Yeah. So, but what I hear you doing is, as the work of a one is, it's not bad, right? It depends what I do with it. From a Jewish perspective, drinking isn't bad. It's not good. You can make the toast that we call kiddush, the blessing over the wine to bring in the Sabbath, or you can put it in a paper bag and ruin your life with it. It's amoral. What you do with it gives it meaning. And so now you're taking this thing, anger, an unhealthy reactive one walks around all day, every day going, I'm bad, I'm bad, I'm bad, I'm bad. It's just in the background there. The anger comes up and it's like, oh my God, I'm really bad. Because now I can use this and not be used by it. And I can harness it. It's there for a reason. You said it, express it, right? It doesn't have to be rage. Enneagram 1s, as you know, it seeps out.
It does.
It's just the seepage. Where the 8 is also just as problematic when it explodes. You implode, and then it just starts seeping out. Now you can start harnessing it, and you can start using it and appreciate it. Right? Befriend it. It's got something to say. And so coming full circle, how do you grow with this? You look at your core type and you just start working the problem, working the issue from your type's vantage point.
I think it separates, it creates space. It creates space for you to respond rather than react. And it's strange when you first start to notice it, because when you notice those tendencies, it's almost like you're watching it on a screen in front of you play out before you. And when you get to that point, that's where you have control. Your head isn't in the sand yet. You can still kind of see what's going on. I remember last night, I had a moment where nothing was wrong. Everything was great. And yet I had this ideal in my head. And something didn't go right. Something didn't go perfect. An extra 5-10 minutes of waiting was added into my plans for the evening. And I watched as and I use the word watched on purpose. I watched as my whole world fell apart in my head. Everything crumbled. Like there was no good left in the world. 5-10 minutes of extra waiting. And I asked myself, I was like, I was confused, but I was like, why did this ruin my evening? But in asking that question and watching, it enabled me to then decide to break out of it before I got sucked into it. And when you get sucked into that state of reaction, that's when you manifest that negativity in your life. Because if you are someone who listens to that, you've then created the ruined evening. And that shows up in different ways for other types. That's just how a one may experience it.
Exactly, because we come back to, you said order, structure, plan, right? And all of a sudden that's disrupted, and just your nervous system, your prefrontal cortex goes into survival mode.
Yeah.
It could be you're, hunting the woolly mammoth in the savannah 50,000 years ago. It's just this wiring, and you've inherited that wiring. You've leaned on that wiring. And then you get to this moment where, you know what? There are no woolly mammoths. I'm okay. This isn't survival mode. This is nothing. And I'm going to watch it. I'm going to look at it. I'm going to understand where it's coming from. That's mastery. That's power, right? That our operating system doesn't determine how we react. We choose how we respond, like you said. And that, when you have this roadmap in front of you, and then you have the roadmap of other people, and you start seeing like certain types trigger each other. When I'm around this type, it really triggers me. So I'm going to now have this roadmap and sort of lay it over the evening. I'm going out with a 7. 8s and 7s can have a real hard time together. And so I'm aware, and I'm not going in blind. And it's not, like your friend said, it's kind of easier to understand how to navigate the road with other people. How do I navigate the road with myself? Well, here you go. Here's your roadmap.
And you can also, an analogy is the same way that I create space by bringing the ideas of the Enneagram into my relationship, where I've then created space for it in my response to others. If you can start to view yourself, the I that is observing me, which is reacting, it is a relationship with the self. And so in the same way that you create space to understand another person through the Enneagram, you can try and do that with yourself. And sometimes have an easier time at doing that. And this gets into the whole system of the Enneagram, whether you're more head think type, heart feeling type, or gut body type. That'll, determine what kind of experience you have with this self-awareness. But that's, again, those are more tools that you can use to understand your different types of reflection.
Well, it's an important point because you said understanding ourselves. I'm not an 8. Just like when people say I'm extroverted, I'm introverted. What does that mean? That's not who you are. That's how you show up. That's how you get your needs met. That's how you survive. Nobody's extroverted or introverted. That's a persona, right? Persona literally is Greek. It means mask. Before they had electrified amplification on the Greek stage, they had these personas, these masks. They were large masks, and it would amplify their voice, or it would sort of shield them. And that's how we use our personality. I am a fill in the blank. And by the way, that's, in biblical terms, that's idolatry. I am is the name of God, right? Ehiyeh asher ehiyeh is what God says to Moses when Moses says, what's your name? I am. It's really I will be, but I am. That's it. It's a verb. It's open-ended. It's process. It's becoming. The moment we say I am introverted, we've now taken this beautiful thing called Yehuda's defiant spirit, his neshama, his soul, and we've quantified it. And we do that to other people, right? You are this. Here's the box. Here's the prison. I've taken this divine, beautiful spirit, and I've just said, this is who you are, made you into a number. And so we do that to ourselves. And the Enneagram challenges us to say, maybe I am more than this thing that I've been wearing around for me the past 52 years, for you the past 22 years.
Yeah, mask is a good way to put it, because when you're in reaction, it's almost like it's an unconscious place that you're in. You've put this mask on unwillingly. It's almost knowing how to take the mask off. And sometimes you have to I like the term fake it till you make it, because when you're in a state of reaction and you feel that fire coming up, or whatever it is, shame, whatever the feeling is that comes up in your state of reaction, you almost have to, if you're a 1, play the part of a 7. If you're a perfectionist, play the part of this spontaneous adventurer. And it breaks you out of it. Even if you're putting on a mask that doesn't feel like yours, it could be the antidote to the one that's trying to be glued on forcefully.
Yeah, and you're right. The antidote is written all over. Sometimes it's a line. This is the antidote. Sometimes it's a wing, the numbers on either side. Sometimes it's part of your whole type, how you act, think, feel. And so you have this sophisticated strategies, practical. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I think people love it. I want to hear more about the 20-somethings because, okay, you know what? I'm acting my 1 out right now. I'm aware. I'm paying attention. I know that there's an antidote in this line to the 7. I said this on the last podcast with you. There have been times when I've told you to go find your 7 right now, get out into the world, get into your pickup truck, drive up to the mountains, and let go of the steam, or let off some of the steam of the 1. And that's that 7 line. I think of your truck as your 7.
Yeah.
Right?
I did that yesterday, actually. Twice. Once in the morning and once at 11 p.m. So it very much... that specific line, that 7 line, has given me a lot of access to my antidote, which is spontaneity and just adventure as a whole. As far as the 20-somethings crowd goes, people are really looking for answers at my age. And using something like the Enneagram, which I ended up bringing to a Shabbat hangout on Saturday. No one was on their phones. We kind of just picked up the books and started reading. Some people really connected to it. And I think it's because this is a very big point of questioning in our lives. I noticed that some people really didn't connect to it, and those were the sixes, the nines, very much like skeptical of it, very much not wanting to give up their autonomy to a system. So even in my age and in a small group of 20-something-year-olds, the patterns still play out as they would, and only proves the system even more. But people really connect to it, and especially a lot of the fours and the twos around me, who want to understand their uniqueness in its own way and understand their helpfulness and how it relates to others. Certain people, I feel like, have more of a tendency to be drawn in towards it than others.
Yeah, people, we need tools. I mean, it's what distinguishes us from animals, right? The invention of the tool by the caveman. And this is just a set of tools. It's like walking around with a toolbox. And I see this because I, coach a few, growing more, 20-somethings, 30-somethings. And I see that so few of them have been given a toolbox, right? They've gone to school, they've memorized things, but very few people I work with say, I got a good set of tools in school to navigate my life. Most of the young people that I work with don't talk about their parents as being providers of practical tools. Some of them do. They come from homes where it's actively, they have things like religion or whatever. But most kids, 20, 30-something young men and women, when I'm working with them, they just look like they've been dropped off in a foreign land and told figure shit out. Resonate? You better not say yes too much, because I'd like to think I gave you some tools.
No, I resonate on the part you talked about with school. I'm in a university setting, and yet many of the people around me are looking for tools in ways that aren't even related to their degree or education. And not that we should be going to school to be getting these tools, but at some capacity, we should be learning. And there's only so much that we can learn from a formal education, like a STEM degree or a liberal arts degree, which teach us about the world, but they don't often teach us about ourselves. Even psychology. I mean, I'm studying psychology, and a lot of my classes have taught me more about how to go about researching the understanding of people. And you get so far up in the clouds and you forget that the people that you may be researching are sitting in that class wondering, how the hell am I supposed to, respond to someone in a clinical setting who has no why, has no understanding of life purpose right now. How do you reach out to that person? How do you do that within yourself? I don't think a lot of people my age have those tools, but there's other ways that they get them. The internet has made that possible. As much as the internet is a tool for bad sometimes, it's also a tool for good. Community on campus has given that space of a tool, functions as a tool, like the Chabad Jewish Center at CU. It's a place for people to find answers in many ways. So I think people are evolving and finding those tools on their own now.
Yeah, people are hungry for it. And especially with the sort of descent of organized religion, you're the exception, as you know, not the rule. Most people, most young people, older people are walking away from organized religion, walking away from organized anything. They want something that's practical, that's actionable, right? That's accessible. And I didn't certainly find it in organized religion, and I think most people don't. So where do you go? What do you do? What do you turn to? And I think that, I think that this is a really up and coming system for people to turn to, and it's good. I believe deeply that there's lots of systems out there. Some are good, some are not good. And so it's important to find something that works and something that's good. So I'm glad that you have brought this to your growing community of 20-somethings here at the University of Colorado Boulder. And hopefully people your age and all ages will be watching this podcast and going, maybe I'll check it out. So give you the last word.
Well, I will say that young people are hungry for this stuff. I have a lot of people I have to put you in touch with on that note, because it is a profound tool out of the many that we're given, and I think there's a lot of good that we can do with it, and I hope to spend some more time talking with you about the different types so that I can understand it better and bring it to my community, and so that other people who are watching can have some practical takeaways, at least a higher degree of awareness of their reactions and whatnot. So
absolutely, that's the last word of the conversation, but I just want to share a little bit about how people can find the Enneagram. You get what you pay for in life. Go out and take a free test. You get a free test. It's not going to hurt you. I don't think it's going to advance your personal growth and development in this lifetime. No harm, no foul, but invest, right? And there's some solid tests out there. I have created Own Your Number, as I think you know, Yuda. Own Your Number gives you a quality Enneagram assessment. That's part of the purchase. But then you get a quality Enneagram assessment, and now what? What do I do with it? And so I created Own Your Number. Have you been on it? I think I need to get you in there. It's relatively new.
Sure.
You get in there. You it's $98. I don't know why 98. My team said 98, but $98, you get the Enneagram assessment, you get your report back, then you get access to this online resource of all 9 types. So you don't have to just pick your top type. You get to learn all 9 of them. You go into a video, you go into workbooks, ebook, and then there's bonus material in there. And so, I really wanted to create an Enneagram product that I was proud of, that also reflects this philosophy that you and I have been talking about, teaching people that they're not a number, but giving them a pathway to understand how they react, respond, and ultimately how to defy your number. And so that's the Enneagram assessment that I offer and the product that goes along with it. And I would love to spread the message, get it out there, because I think it does some real good in this world. So you'll help me spread it, and we'll keep doing this podcast.
Let's do it.
Thanks for being on.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for bringing Momo, the star
No
of the
problem.
show. This thing's going viral just because of Momo.